The 2000s was an interesting time for the car scene, as tuner culture was in full swing. Both the Need for Speed Underground games and the Midnight Club series were capitalizing on this trend. With Midway seeing the success of these games, they wanted in on this market. They tasked Pitbull Syndicate with rebooting the Rush series, and this resulted in LA Rush. Released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and in 2006 for the PC and on the PSP as Rush, the game took heavy inspiration from Midnight Club. However, it received a middling critic reception and marked the end of the Rush series. This video will dive into what went wrong with LA Rush that made it a failed entry in the street racing game space. The campaign consists of a basic but yet terrible story. To sum it up, the character you play as, Trix, is a famous street racer with a ton of money and cars. However, he has all of his assets stolen by a guy named Lydell. Trix then enters street races organized by Lydell to get money, while his friend Ty helps to find the stolen vehicles by talking to Lydell's girlfriend. The main gameplay loop consists of doing races, getting your vehicles back, and occasional retribution missions to mess with Lydell. Already, you can tell the story makes absolutely no sense, and the gameplay loop can get repetitive after a while. To add to this, the characters are so stereotypical that it hurts. With poor writing and bad voice acting, listening to them will make you cringe. While I welcome the idea of having a story in a racing game, LA Rush fails to deliver a good and engaging premise for its campaign. The vehicles in LA Rush are very hit or miss. There are a total of 36 licensed cars, with an additional 20 fictional concept cars. While there's a good amount of vehicles, they aren't the most distinct from each other. Top speed and acceleration does vary considerably, but the handling only differs slightly between vehicle types. Plus, engine sounds are reused multiple times on completely different car models. What also doesn't help is how the game constantly switches you out of vehicles. When you obtain a new vehicle from an acquire mission, you are spawned outside with that new vehicle instead of being sent into your garage. This really pushes you to use it until you get your next one, and this process repeats over and over again. Despite all of these issues, the biggest offender has to be the vehicle customization. When bringing a car to West Coast Customs, you can't choose any of the visual customization you receive, not even the color. The game gives you a pre-built car without any user input. Plus, you can't revert it back to stock once this process is done. It is stuck like that forever. When compared to the vast, player-driven customization in Underground 2 and Midnight Club 3, this is embarrassing. With similar feeling vehicles, constantly being switched out of what you are driving, and poor customization, LA Rush does a terrible job of utilizing its car roster. The races in LA Rush have the same checkpoint-styled structure seen in Midnight Club, with point-to-point and multi-lap circuit courses. In Midnight Club, you get to see the current checkpoint and a preview of the next one. You can also bring up the map to see all the checkpoints that aren't visible yet. None of this is in LA Rush. You only see the current checkpoint and there is no map you can bring up. Plus, with the mini-maps so zoomed in and the checkpoints usually being far apart from each other, it can be hard to see where the next checkpoint is. This means you can easily miss a turn or take the wrong route, as the upcoming checkpoint can be somewhere you never expected. Traffic can be also super dense, to a point where you're going to crash into traffic in every single race. Additionally, there's a lot of scripted events, which includes traffic pulling out in front of you, semi-trucks to drive underneath, roadblocks, and cops swarming. These events trigger only for the player, so the other AI racers will usually get away unscathed. Thankfully, you don't have to be in first place to progress in the campaign. Despite this, the bad checkpoint design, heavy traffic, and scripted events makes the racing range from tolerable to downright rage-inducing. I've still lost plenty of races due to these terrible design decisions. The physics in LA Rush is an aspect that I'm mixed on. While it's nowhere as terrible as other racing games I've played, the physics also aren't really that great either. The handling model is a bit weird. Not only is it very sensitive, but it also changes drastically at different speeds. Cars at low speeds have massive oversteer and can turn extremely sharply. When at higher speeds, the handling becomes understeery instead, so it's more so about making smaller adjustments. Also, the game is heavily grip-based, so doing power slides is not that viable as your car slows down considerably. Although, once you understand the game's handling model, it won't be as awkward as it initially seems. What doesn't help is that the brakes are terrible. It takes a lot of cars too long to slow down, which means you can easily overshoot turns. Also, the suspension physics can cause your car to bounce up, making going on jumps and driving over bumps very unpredictable. Additionally, landing from jumps can result in your car either veering to one side, coming to an almost complete stop, or just fine with no problems. When it comes to the crash physics, these are honestly a lot of fun. Crashing into traffic and seeing opponents smash into stuff is quite enjoyable. However, LA Rush also took some inspiration from Burnout with the addition of crash cams, which aren't the greatest. It's not consistent on when they activate, the slow motion is way too slow, and they can't be turned off. You can fast forward through them, which makes them at least more bearable. I do feel that the terrible third-person camera makes the physics look worse than they are. It does a bad job of following the car when turning, especially when doing sharp turns. Depending on the jump or crash, it can also wildly throw off the camera. Plus, when at higher speeds, it shakes so violently that it's actually hard to look at the screen. Overall, while the physics in LA Rush aren't terrible, they are nowhere as good as Midnight Club 3, and the game's camera certainly doesn't help with this. The soundtrack in LA Rush is actually quite decent, with hip-hop, techno, and rock. Despite me not being a fan of hip-hop, I've always enjoyed the song selection in this game. So, if I don't hate the soundtrack, then what is the problem here? Well, it's how you go about selecting them. In the menu, you're given the three choices of hip-hop, techno, and rock. However, you could only choose one of these playlists to listen to at a time. You can't have all three or two on at the same time, which is insane because no other game I've played has a restriction like this. Screwing up a basic feature like selecting music really shows how incompetent this game can be. LA Rush is a technical mess. Textures can occasionally unload and reload right in front of you. Sometimes after a crash camera, you'll see the message of, "Please wait," when the map fails to load fast enough. Consistent frame drops and slowdowns can happen on console and even on an emulator. The vehicles have gray tires in the PS2, the cars in Xbox get way too dark when damaged, and its PC version is the worst I've ever seen. I've already made a video on LA Rush's PC port years ago if you want to see how bad it is. Having a technically sound game is very important to the experience, and LA Rush completely fails on this aspect. While I spent quite a lot of time bashing LA Rush, I do want to finish off this video by covering its good qualities. Firstly, I like the look of the menus and HUD. It has a nice presentation throughout, with its color, design, and animations. Secondly, I love the map. There is a certain level of detail and charm that makes you want to explore and take in the world. Thirdly, the vehicle damage is quite good. Considering that there are damage restrictions on licensed vehicles, they can get pretty banged up in this game. The crash cams also show even more damage with parts actually falling off. Fourthly, the acquire missions are a lot of fun. You need to bring your car back to your main house while Lydell's men try to stop you. These events are like the Marked Man events from Burnout Paradise, but even more insane. Not only is the AI absolutely relentless, but the police can also join in on the mix as well. Some of the game's best moments is seeing the massive mess unfold when trying to get home alive. Lastly, the fast traffic cheat is amazing. This cheat makes the traffic speed increase substantially, causing hilarious chaos. Cars flying off cliffs, huge pileups into walls, and trains that can absolutely obliterate your car makes this one of the best cheats I've ever seen in a video game. LA Rush was a failed attempt at not only rebooting the Rush series, but also making a viable Midnight Club competitor. While I still don't think the game is as bad as some say, probably due to my heavy nostalgia bias, it's still not a great racing game. From its awful story, lackluster vehicles, bad racing, questionable physics, restrictive music selection, and technical issues, this game rushed itself to the bargain bin. This has been Gamer Alex. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a great day.